David and Sarah's marriage had once been a fairy tale. Friends remembered the young couple who danced barefoot at their wedding, laughing as though nothing could ever touch them. Over the years, they built a picture-perfect life. A 2-story house with white fences, family vacations to the beach, children who excelled in school. To outsiders, they were the dream. Yet beneath the polished surface, the cracks began to spread quietly, like fractures in glass that no one notices until it shatters. Sarah noticed the distance first. David no longer kissed her forehead before leaving for work. He stopped asking about her day, and conversations that once lasted hours became reduced to nods and shrugs. She tried to blame stress, long hours, or the weight of his career, but her intuition screamed otherwise. The man who once held her close now pulled away at every touch, and the warmth that once filled their home turned into a cold silence that unsettled her. One rainy evening, while folding his laundry, Sarah found a receipt tucked in his jacket pocket, an expensive downtown hotel. Her heart raced. She tried to convince herself it was for business, but the doubt gnawed at her. Later, with trembling hands, she scrolled through his phone while he showered. The screen lit up with dozens of messages from a woman named Jessica, words of affection, plans for secret meetings. Her stomach dropped. It felt as if the walls of her home had caved in on her. The next night, she confronted him. Dinner was on the table, the children quietly eating. Her voice shook as she asked, "Who is Jessica?" David froze. He forced a laugh, brushed it off, then grew defensive. "You're imagining things," he snapped. But Sarah had the screenshots, the receipts. His face hardened, pride replacing guilt. "You're overreacting. You always do." His denial was louder than his silence, and the children's wide eyes darted between their parents, absorbing the chaos that fractured the only world they knew. Sarah's heartbreak turned into fire. She realized David wouldn't stop, wouldn't change. The next morning, she called Ms. Carter, a divorce attorney known for her sharp mind and steady hand. Sitting in the quiet office, Sarah broke down as she explained the betrayal. Carter listened, calmly, then said, "You're not just fighting for yourself, you're fighting for your children's stability. We'll get you justice." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a flicker of strength. David refused to back down. He hired Mr. Blake, a cunning lawyer who prided himself on tearing opponents apart in court. Blake wasted no time painting Sarah as emotional, unstable, and controlling. David paraded around like a victim, pretending Sarah was simply bitter and vindictive. The case, once private, became the subject of gossip in their neighborhood. Friends whispered, colleagues exchanged knowing glances. Their private war spilled into the streets. The courtroom turned into a battlefield. Sarah sat straight-backed, holding her lawyer's hand, while David sat smugly with Blake whispering in his ear. Witnesses were called. Sarah's best friend described how Sarah had broken down the night she discovered the truth. A neighbor testified about hearing fights late at night. Finally, the private investigator revealed damning photographs of David and Jessica entering hotels together. Each new piece of evidence pierced David's defense, and his confident facade began to crumble. At home, the children carried invisible wounds. Alex, once lively and social, grew quiet. He quit his basketball team, ignoring calls from friends. Emma, still too young to process betrayal, clung to Sarah constantly, crying at night, whispering, "Don't let Dad leave us." Sarah's heart shattered each time, but she kissed her daughter's forehead and promised, "You will never lose me." Their pain became her fuel in court, every tear another reason to fight harder. David's double life began to collapse. Jessica, tired of the drama, abandoned him without a word. At work, whispers about his messy divorce spread quickly. The promotion he had worked years for slipped through his fingers. His friends distanced themselves, tired of the chaos surrounding him. Alone, he drowned his pride in alcohol, nursing glass after glass in dimly lit bars, staring at the reflection of a man he no longer recognized. One night, consumed by anger and whiskey, David drove through the city recklessly. The headlights blurred, the world tilted, He nearly collided with another car before swerving violently to the side. Breathing heavily, his hands shaking, he sat there with his heart pounding. In that moment, he realized how far he had fallen. But pride kept him silent, and instead of seeking redemption, he sank deeper into denial. The final day of the trial felt like a storm about to break. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. David sat with his jaw clenched, his lawyer making one last plea. "My client made mistakes, but every man deserves a second chance. These children need their father." Blake's words rang loud, but they felt hollow. When Miss Carter rose, her voice was sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "This case is not about second chances. It is about trust, responsibility, and the future of two innocent children." David chose deceit and betrayal. Sarah chose honesty and sacrifice. Which home do you think these children deserve? Her words lingered in the air, heavy and undeniable. The judge's decision struck like thunder. Full custody to Sarah. David was ordered to pay alimony and child support, with visitation strictly limited. As the words left the judge's mouth, David's shoulders slumped. The arrogance drained from his face, leaving only defeat. For the first time, he looked like a broken man. Sarah broke into tears of relief. She hugged Alex tightly, Emma pressed against her side, both children sobbing into her embrace. The war was over, and though the scars would remain, she had won them a future built on truth. The courtroom blurred with her tears, but she knew she had done the right thing. Weeks later, Sarah packed up what remained of her life and moved with her children into a modest apartment. It was smaller, but it was warm, filled with laughter instead of lies. Together they painted walls, unpacked boxes, and created new memories. Slowly, the weight of betrayal lifted, replaced by the fragile beginnings of peace. At night, Sarah stood by the window, watching the city lights. Her children slept peacefully for the first time in months. She whispered to herself, "I thought this would break me, but it made me stronger. I will rise again, not just for me, but for them." The reflection in the glass was no longer a broken woman, but a survivor. David, meanwhile, sat in his empty house, the silence louder than any argument. Jessica's perfume had faded. His friends no longer called. Even the laughter of his children had been replaced by echoes. He wandered aimlessly from room to room, haunted by ghosts of what once was. One evening, he stepped into Alex's old room. The basketball lay in the corner, dust beginning to gather. David picked it up, holding it against his chest, tears streaming down his face. The trophies, the posters, the drawings, all reminders of the son who no longer lived under his roof. Regret burned through him, sharper than any courtroom verdict. Sarah's life began to bloom again. She cooked dinners with her children, helped Alex return to basketball, encouraged Emma to draw and laugh again. The small apartment filled with love, laughter, and resilience. Every day wasn't easy, but every day was theirs, honest and free. The story ends in contrast. Sarah, with her children by her side, bathed in morning sunlight, moving forward with courage and hope. David, alone in the dark, clutching an empty glass, his life consumed by silence. Choices have consequences, and his betrayal had cost him everything. Sarah's modest apartment soon began to feel like a real home. The first few weeks were filled with the chaos of unpacking boxes, buying cheap furniture, and trying to create a routine. Yet in that chaos, there was laughter. Emma running down the hallway with paint on her hands, Alex carefully setting up his basketball posters in his new room. What had begun as a painful exile was slowly turning into a fresh start. Sarah made it a point to spend evenings with her children. They cooked together, tried new recipes, and sometimes burned dinner, only to laugh over pizza deliveries. She was determined to create stability, reminding them that love wasn't measured by the size of a house, but by the warmth within it. Alex still struggled with anger toward his father. Sometimes he refused to speak about him at all, locking himself in his room with headphones. Sarah didn't push, but one evening she sat beside him, gently saying, "You don't have to forgive him right now. Just know that none of this is your fault." Alex's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in months, he let himself cry openly. Emma adapted more quickly. She filled the apartment walls with colorful drawings, smiling suns, stick figures holding hands. Sarah noticed she always drew 3 people: herself, her brother, and her mother. David was never in the pictures. The absence spoke louder than words, a reflection of the wound too deep for a child to express. Meanwhile, David's world continued to unravel. The house that once felt like a castle now felt like a prison. Bills piled up, alimony drained his paycheck, and his career slipped further into jeopardy. At work, his boss warned him that another missed deadline would cost him his position, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in bitterness and regret. Loneliness gnawed at him. He tried calling Jessica, but she never answered. Old friends avoided him, tired of being caught in the middle. Even his own parents, once supportive, told him bluntly, "You brought this on yourself." He sat for hours in front of the television, but the silence of the empty house was louder than any show could cover. One weekend, desperate, David called Sarah. His voice cracked as he asked if he could see the kids outside of his visitation schedule. Sarah paused, torn between anger and compassion, but ultimately said no. "The judge's order is clear. If you want to see them, follow the rules." The conversation ended coldly, leaving David staring at the phone, his hands trembling. In court, David attempted to appeal for more visitation rights. His lawyer argued that he had a stable home and a steady income. But Sarah's attorney countered with evidence of his drinking and reckless driving incident. The judge, unimpressed, denied his request. David left the courtroom with his head low, his last hope slipping away. Sarah, though victorious, never felt joy in David's downfall. She told her children that their father still loved them, even if he had made mistakes. "Love doesn't always mean we stay together," she explained gently. "Sometimes it means keeping each other safe, even from pain." Over time, Alex slowly returned to basketball. His coach welcomed him back, and the sound of the bouncing ball in the gym became therapy. Sarah watched him from the bleachers, clapping proudly as he regained confidence. She knew he still carried scars, but each game was a step toward healing. Emma discovered her own escape through art. Sarah enrolled her in a weekend class, where she painted vibrant canvases filled with color. The instructor praised her talent, telling Sarah she has a gift. For Emma, painting was more than a hobby. It was a way to rewrite her world, to paint over the gray shadows of the past. Sarah herself began to rediscover life. She started jogging in the mornings, feeling strength return to her body. She joined a local support group for single mothers, finding comfort in shared stories of resilience. With each passing week, she felt lighter, as though she was slowly reclaiming the parts of herself David's betrayal had tried to destroy. David, on the other hand, sank deeper. Nights became longer, his drinking heavier. He avoided mirrors, unable to face the reflection of his failures. One night, stumbling through the living room, he tripped over a forgotten toy left behind by his children. He picked it up, a small stuffed bear, and clutched it to his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. His neighbors began to notice the decline. Once a proud homeowner, now he left his lawn unkempt, trash bins overflowing. Gossip spread about his late-night arguments with himself, the shouting echoing down the quiet street. He had become a ghost of the man who once seemed untouchable. Sarah, though aware of his decline, focused on her children. She refused to let his darkness invade their new light. "We are building something new," she told Alex and Emma. "The past will not define us." Her determination became the foundation of their new life, brick by emotional brick. Months later, Sarah received news that David had been suspended from his job. His drinking had affected his performance beyond repair. When he called her in despair, slurring his words, she listened but did not rescue him. "You need help, David," she said firmly. "But I can't be the one to save you anymore." This moment marked a turning point. Sarah realized she had finally let go of the guilt, the anger, and the weight of responsibility for his choices. She was free to focus on her own path and her children's. Alex's team won their first big game of the season, and Sarah celebrated with him, snapping photos as he grinned for the first time in months. Emma's artwork was displayed in a small gallery show, her bright paintings drawing compliments from strangers. Sarah stood between her children, her heart swelling with pride. David, watching from afar, felt the sting of what he had lost. He stood outside the gallery once, peeking through the window, too ashamed to enter. Inside, Sarah and the children laughed together, radiant under the warm lights. David turned away, disappearing into the night, his figure swallowed by shadows. For Sarah, life had not returned to what it once was. It had become something new, stronger, braver, honest. Her wounds had not vanished, but they had healed into scars she carried with dignity. With each sunrise, she chose not just survival, but growth. Her children thrived by her side, proof that love built on truth could weather any storm.